Absolutely, positively.
100%. All right, you are listening to Common Sense Matters, the Franklin County Democratic Party's radio show, and we want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. This is our last show until after the holidays, and I have, Nancy's here. Nancy's not necessarily a guest. She's more like a host, too, but Nancy's going to talk to us a little bit about the healthcare sign-up, because the deadline is tomorrow, and she's going to talk to y'all a little bit about that. And then I'm going to talk with LendaSherrell. Linda's a CPA, and she knows a lot about the GOP tax bill, and we're going to talk about that. But first, I wanted to just make a few quick announcements for the Franklin County Democratic Party. We had floats in the Cowan Christmas Parade, the Huntland Christmas Parade, and the Decker Christmas Parade. So I hope you saw us. We had a great float, threw out a lot of candy. And we have a meeting coming up this Saturday, December 16th at 9 o'clock a.m. at the Franklin County Annex. So we would love to have any of y'all show up. It's going to be this Saturday, December 16th at the Franklin County Annex Small Meeting Room. And then right after that, we're going to do a road cleanup. We did the Adopt-A-Mile between North Junior High and Grant Funeral Home. And so we'll be cleaning that afterwards and having lunch at Las Margaritas. But anyway, let's let Nancy talk to y'all about a really important deadline coming up tomorrow.
Thanks, Helen. December 15th, that is tomorrow, is the last day of open enrollment to sign up for a health care plan on the marketplace. A couple of things especially I wanted to mention. People tell me sometimes that I went online and I got quoted this premium of $500 to $600, and what that means is, to me, if you went online or if you talk to the marketplace and you give them an estimated income, say you're one person, a single person, and I'm looking at the household size here and the income guidelines. And when they ask you what your estimated income is for 2018, and you're one person household, and you tell them, oh, it's $11,000, then the system, their computer system, is going to quote you the whole price of your policy, your plan, because you don't qualify for the premium tax credits. And I put a Facebook post on this morning, and I thought I brought a copy of it. But anyway, what I wanted to stress to you, and you still got today and tomorrow to do this, your estimated income for 2018 must be within the federal poverty guidelines of 100% to 400%. And I put it online this morning, those actual figures for a household, family of one, person of one. Your estimated income for next year must be at least $12,060 or not over the 400% level, which is $48,240. If you're not within those figures, those guidelines, then the system is they'll sell your policy, they'll sell your marketplace plan, but you won't get the tax credits. And now, in Franklin County and some other counties, Blue Cross Blue Shield offers a good plan for zero premiums up to a certain level. Of course, the higher the income, it's going to go up more than zero. And unfortunately, the deductibles and the out-of-pocket maximums go up. But getting a zero premium plan is just priceless. You get insurance. So think about on your estimated income for next year, if you're coming up too low, if it looks like you're going to make $11,000 or 10 or under that 12, be creative and think really hard of things that you can do, just pick up jobs, part-time jobs, to pick up a little extra money to legitimately, you don't want to just make up something, to legitimately get that income up to an estimated amount. And they may ask for verification later on, but it is an estimated amount, and it can change.
And Nancy, if somebody needs help getting signed up, can they get in touch with you?
Yes, get in touch with me, and I'll get you help somehow. 962-4982, or 308-7150. That's 308-7150, my cell number. If you're on the high end, if your income is, you're one person, and it looks like your income is going to be more than that $48,240, there are deductions, and LendaSherrell is here this morning. She'll know all about this, about all of it, in fact, because she's a tax person. But anyway, there are deductions that you can take. For instance, IRA deposits that can bring that total down. They're basically on the bottom part of your 1040 form. Look at that. Get advice if you're over that 400% level, like for one person, $448. Well, $48,240. Two-person household at $64,960. Talk to your tax advisor about possibly making an IRA deposit to bring that down. And when you get into the weeds there, you do need tax help. But it can mean the difference in your paying, being quoted a figure of maybe $2,000 for two people for policy, as opposed to getting the tax credits and being a whole lot lower than that. So that's mostly what I wanted you to. I just wanted to throw that out there and stress. Work on that income if you can at all. And some people, and this is so sad to me, I still see so many people that don't have enough income to qualify for the tax credits. For instance, one person, $12,060 a year. Two people would have to be $16,240. And of course, that's where you've heard a lot about it. We wanted our state legislature to pass Governor Haslam's Insure Tennessee, which was sort of like an expansion of Medicaid, to take care of those people that just don't have the income. And they are real. They're out there. There are many of them, and their main source of medical care is go to the emergency room, which is not good. Y'all call me if you want to at 308-7150, and if I can't do it myself, I'll tell you how to get help to get this done by tomorrow night.
Nancy has gotten so many people hooked up with insurance. She is a saint for that.
No.
Well, thank you so much, Nancy. I hope people take advantage of that. All right. So, Al, were you as surprised as I was about the Senate election in Alabama?
I don't think so.
You weren't surprised?
I think everybody saw which way that was going.
I was surprised.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't watch any of the coverage that night, and I had been at a Democratic women's meeting, actually, that night.
Yes, we did,
yeah. At the Fiesta Grill, and I was really tired. I came home. I was just fixing to go to bed, and I just said, look at my phone, and wow, that was quite...
Why is it surprising to you?
I don't know. I just thought no way a Democrat could win in Alabama. I don't know. I mean, he was a particularly bad candidate for the Republicans, but anyway, I was very pleasantly surprised by that. But let's hope that he will be able to vote to stop this GOP tax bill, because that is what we're going to talk about today. And there are two versions, right, of the GOP tax bill. But before we start getting into the weeds about what I want to talk about is how it would affect regular people, small businesses, regular people putting kids through school, things like that. But I want to talk just really briefly first about sort of the philosophical underpinnings of this tax bill. And I would say that the main philosophical foundation of this GOP tax bill, this Republican tax bill, is the belief in trickle-down economics.
Yeah.
So could you, in a nutshell, tell the viewers or the listeners what we mean by trickle-down economics?
Yes.
Wait, I'm sorry, and I have not really properly introduced Linda. Linda is a CPA. she is. Where were you born and raised?
Well, I was born in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, and grew up in Sparta.
Sparta. Okay. All right. And you were a CFO for
a school. Yeah. My background is that I was an auditor for the early part of my career, working with not-for-profit educational and healthcare institutions.
Okay.
So lots of schools and hospitals and clients like that, and then ended my career as a CFO for a school.
Good. And you ran for Congress against Scott DesJarlais.
I did.
2 cycles ago?
2014.
2014. And you have how many kids and grandkids?
I have 2 grown children and 4 grandchildren.
2 children and 4 grandchildren?
Yes.
Okay. And your husband is a physician?
Retired
Okay.
physician.
And then y'all live up in Monteagle?
We do. We lived in Chattanooga 30 years, but we've lived in Monteagle for 10 years now.
I've known you all this time, and I'm having to still ask you all these questions. I'm embarrassed. But I just wanted the viewers to just know who you were. So you know finances, you know taxes, inside and out. So that's why we have you here. So if you could just tell us, like, what trickle-down economics is in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, the idea is that if corporations have more money in their coffers because their taxes are reduced, that they will then spend that money to create more jobs and to build their infrastructure, and that money will then trickle down to their employees, who will then have more money in their pockets, and they will spend it in the community, and it will create actually more revenue for tax cuts that were given to those corporations. And the theory is that then because they're making more money, the employees are making more money, they'll be paying more taxes, and everything will balance out in the end.
So it sounds like, wow, that just sounds great. But does it ever work in reality?
Well, we hear stories coming from the states. You hear often, and I think this is true, that states sort of are incubators for policy that could be national policy. But, there was a recent example in Kansas where their governor, Governor Brownback, decided that he was going to implement tax cuts in Kansas, and that it was going to be an example of trickle-down economics. It was
trickle-down on steroids.
It really was, because, they wound up with a $1 billion deficit, and
schools were cut.
They were winding up with, cutting education funding. Actually, they cut education funding so much that they wound up with a state Supreme Court case, which said they had cut education funding too much, and the Supreme Court mandated that they raise education funding. And, the idea that this was going to impact their economy positively didn't really work out on that level, but also they found that businesses weren't really moving to Kansas because of the low tax rate, and businesses are considering more than just the taxes they pay. Mm-hmm. They're looking for infrastructure that supports their employees. They want a good education system. Mm-hmm. They want a good healthcare system. Mm-hmm. They want the kind of infrastructure that is a good environment for their employees.
Mm-hmm. Bobby Jindal did that in Louisiana, where I'm from, and he totally bankrupted the state. I mean, bankrupted the state. They almost had to cut the football program at LSU and other schools, and that's when people were like, no, this is the last straw. And they actually just elected a Democratic governor, John Bel Edwards, in Louisiana, and he's going to clean up the mess.
Well, yeah, and they were also, like Tennessee, a state that had turned down the funding for Medicaid expansion. Like Nancy was talking about, and I believe now they have approved
John Bel
that,
Edwards is going to do it. Okay, so you're talking about trickle down. It's saying that if a corporation has more money in their coffers, then that means that they'll raise wages for their workers. Well, let's just use Walmart for an example. We all know Walmart. We all go to Walmart. They got $14.7 billion in net profits. That's net. And they pay their workers a minimum wage. I mean, so they have the money. So if they got more tax cuts, that's not going to make any difference. They are still going to pay their workers the absolute minimum that they can possibly legally get away with, and that's minimum wage. And we all know people right here in Winchester who are making minimum wage at Walmart. You know, they have the money to pay their workers. Probably they could pay their workers $20 an hour if they wanted to, with all their massive profits. So I don't understand how they think giving Walmart more money is going to make Walmart pay their workers more. I mean, that just makes no sense to me. And they even did President Trump's cabinet put together a big panel of CEOs. And a Wall Street Journal reporter asked this room full of CEOs, raise your hand if you plan on using these tax cuts to raise your workers' pay. And only like 3 hands went up in a room of like 100 people.
Right.
And they even said, where are all the hands? You know, what they're going to do with these tax cuts, and you know this, Linda, is they're going to put it into stock buybacks and dividends to their shareholders. So the rich are going to, I mean, yes, some of us have money in the stock market. Yeah, we would benefit, but what percentage of people are even invested in the stock market? Most people are just living paycheck to paycheck.
Well,
they're not going to benefit from that.
Right, exactly. And, you know, this is just an example of sort of what the priorities are of corporations, and they live and die by their share price.
Mm-hmm. They serve their shareholders.
They're
not there to serve their workers.
Yeah. So you know, we're seeing the stock market right now at an all-time high. It's been rising this whole year. I mean, it's at record levels. Well, it's true, Helen. I mean, that is benefiting people who have money in the stock market. If you have a 401k plan, you've probably seen your 401k plan go up double digits this year. Just a caveat there, I will say, as part of my job previously, I was responsible for managing our school's endowment, which was invested in the stock market, and our guidelines were that over the long haul, the stock market is going to average going up about 8% a year. So, you know, this run-up that we're seeing right now will be followed over the long haul by some downturns. But right now, you know, going back to your point about the CEOs raising their hands, there was actually, I ran across this the other day. Bank of America, which is one of the biggest banks in the country, was curious about this question. And they put out a survey asking what CEOs were going to do because they were just curious.
With these tax cuts.
Mm-hmm. And they found that about 30% of them said that they were going to invest it in expenditures, either increasing their infrastructure or raising wages. The other 70% were basically putting it back into their stock buybacks, increasing their share price, you know, again, serving the interest of their shareholders.
Things that the average worker will never see.
Exactly.
Will never benefit from. Yeah. And, you know, Democrats in this whole, I mean, Democrats haven't played much of a role at all in crafting this tax bill, but they did offer an amendment to ensure that corporations use their tax savings to raise employee wages at the same rate that they increase executive pay, stock buybacks, dividends to shareholders. But every Republican voted that down.
Well, right, and
they don't want. I don't understand that.
You know, unless and I think that was a good amendment because, you know, unless you incentivize these CEOs and companies to do what's right for their employees, then they're going to just go back to plowing the money back into their businesses and raising their share prices.
And they're not like evil, bad people. They are bound by law to serve their shareholders.
Exactly.
We're not saying that these CEOs are evil and bad. Of course, they could raise their wages if they wanted to. Big businesses, you know. I know a lot of small businesses can't, but they are sort of morally and legally bound to do the best to optimize things for their investors, not so much for their workers.
Right, and if that's not incentivized by public policy that protects ordinary everyday people, then you're right. You know, they're bound to do what the law allows them to do.
One thing that President Trump said is that, and so one area where I agree with Trump a lot about is I hate seeing these corporations moving abroad to other countries. Like they make all their profits off of American consumers, and then they go hoard their money off in places like Switzerland and stuff like that. Well, anyway, Trump claims that corporations will relocate to the U.S. once these tax rates are lower. Do you think that they will? Because I know that President George W. Bush and Obama both held tax amnesties for companies a while back, and did that work? Did they repatriate?
They didn't.
They didn't.
They did not. And you know, they have lots of reasons for moving their profits offshore, and you know, lowering this tax rate is, and even, you know, they're lowering, as I understand it, the repatriation rate now down to 7%, so they can move money back into the United States and pay a lower 7% rate on that repatriated money, which is going to save them billions of dollars. But it's not going to keep them moving that money back over the long haul.
Okay. So, I guess the main thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I know we have two bills. We've got the Senate bill and we've got the House bill. But overall, who will the winners be and who will the losers be in this tax bill? Like, if you could talk a little bit about that, who the winners will be and who the losers will be. I think we all know who the winners will be.
Well, yeah, we've already talked about that a good bit. You know, corporations.
My friend had a meme on Facebook, and it said, "To those whom much is given, more will be given." No, to those whom much has been given, more will be given. So, yeah, the rich are going to get richer. We know that.
Yeah, so,
who will lose?
Yeah, so to start with, you know, and what you're talking about there is corporations are getting a massive tax cut. Right now, their top rate is 35%. And I think I heard this morning that in merging these two bills, the House and the Senate bill, that their rate is now going to be cut to 21%. That's almost a 50% cut for corporations. And I think you have to look at, you know, the federal budget and, you know, put that in the context of how we do our own budget. So for the federal government, their income is tax revenue. Their outgo is expenditures on programs like defense, our military, our social service programs, our social safety nets like Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security, and programs like that. So for, I mean, you know, managing your own budget, if you're cutting your revenue, you have less income, then you're either going to have to raise income from somewhere else or you're going to have to cut expenses. So with a big tax cut like this, what the Republicans have said is we're going to not raise the deficit by any more than $1.5 trillion. Now, you know, think about that. You've got people like Senator Bob Corker, who says that any increase in the deficit is unacceptable, and that's why he voted against the Senate version of the bill. The argument on the other side is that because of trickle-down economics, this bill is going to pay for itself. That $1.5 trillion is going to pay for itself. Well, any economic analysis that I have seen, the most that they think is going to be generated by increased growth is maybe $500 billion. That still leaves a debt to my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren of $1 trillion that's going to be added over the next 10 years. So in order to pay for that, there's a lot of wheeling and dealing that is going on right now as they're trying to merge these two bills. So a lot of deals are being made. You know, one senator will have a special interest that they want protected, like small businesses. Another senator will have another interest that they want protected. And so they'll wheel and deal in terms of the kinds of cuts they're going to make. But to get to your point of who are going to be the losers, the losers are going to be us, individuals, who will see a short-term tax decrease Next year, if
maybe $1,000.
maybe $1,000, certainly not $1 billion like the corporations are seeing. But the other thing that is happening is, in order to fit into that $1.5 trillion deficit number, they're using a lot of tricks to be sure that happens. And one of the tricks they're using is they're letting these tax cuts expire in 2025. Now, for corporations,
the ones for individual people,
for middle-class
people,
for middle class,
so ours are temporary.
Ours are temporary for 8 years. Corporate tax cuts are permanent. That does not go away.
Okay. And I have heard that small businesses will no longer be able to count quite a few deductions. Now, there's all sorts of deductions that people are going to lose that we might count on, like our mortgage deduction, things like that. What are some of the ways in which this is going to hurt small businesses?
Well, so small businesses, 95% of small businesses, and I'm talking about, when I say small businesses, the technical definition is that they employ less than 500 people. But actually, 50%, 60% of that number are actually businesses that employ less than 10 people. Most of those small businesses, entrepreneurs, self-employed people, report their income on their tax return in what is called a pass-through way. So they'll be filing a Schedule C, where they report all of their income and all of their expenses and come down to a net income.
And then their expenses might be stuff like gas, rent on a building,
utilities,
okay.
Right, yeah, copiers, printer paper,
okay.
Right, that kind of thing. All of those expenses count. And then they come down to a bottom line, and the average income for a sole proprietor or an entrepreneur is about $50,000. And so that income flows through then to their 1040, to their tax return. And they're going to be paying the same rate on their tax return that they would be paying as an individual. So when it comes to the individual tax return, one of the things that is proposed and is put forth as something that's going to help individual taxpayers, including small business owners, is that they are raising the standard deduction. They're almost doubling the standard deduction. So right now, if you're...
And what is the standard deduction? I'm so ignorant.
The standard deduction... The standard deduction, if you're a single taxpayer, is $6,350.
Okay, so if that were the case, if you knew that you didn't put out in expenses more than that, you would just use the standard deduction.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. And that's being doubled to $12,200 for an individual. So, you also have the personal exemption. So you can take off $4,050 for yourself and for each dependent that you have. So right now, unless you are making more than $10,350, you don't have to file a tax return, but anything above $10,350, you're going to pay tax on at a very low rate. I think the lowest rate right now is 10%. But if you're, making, go back to that example of $50,000, you're making $40,000 more than that $10,000, then you're going to have to pay tax, and that rate is going to be graduated depending on the bracket that you fall in. That's something we don't know yet. Those brackets are going to be expanded, so right now if you make up to, I think as an individual, $20,000, you're going to be paying at that 10% rate, and then anything above that, you go up to a 15% rate.
So small businesses will be hurt in that they can't take as many deductions? I'm still not clear.
Yeah, I think they're going to be hurt more with the tax rate structure.
Okay.
I mean, I think the deductions are still going to be there, but the tax rate structure is such that they're not going to be able to, they're really not going to see a tax decrease.
Well, I know who one loser will be, and that is me, because I work for a college, and one of the best benefits that Sewanee offers, or that many colleges offer their employees, is tuition remission, meaning my children can go to college at either Sewanee, where I work, or there's a group of other colleges where you get tuition exchange with. So I'm sending one daughter to Sewanee and another daughter to another college, and those two daughters at two colleges, it's basically around $30,000 per child that I'm getting in tuition benefits. So if you add those two 30s together, $60,000, that is now going to be, under this new plan, considered taxable income. So it would be as if I got a $60,000 raise at my job. So I am going to have to pay a lot more in taxes if this passes. And I don't make much at all at my job, but I'm okay with that because I knew that was one of my benefits. I would work for almost nothing to get that valuable and wonderful benefit, and that is now going to be taxable. And so everyone I work with who has children is freaking out about this because it's going to cause all of our taxes to rise big time. And they seem to be really going after higher education. Like, what is the provision about grad students that they're...
Well, graduate students are affected in the same way that your kids are, but even more so, because colleges and universities use graduate students to help with their graduate programs. They're teaching classes. They're graduate assistants. They're helping the professors with all kinds of ways. And for that, they get a stipend, but they also do get this tuition remission that you're talking about. So here's a graduate student who, my daughter did this. She was a graduate student, and I think she got a stipend of maybe $15,000, which helped pay her living expenses for the year. Which helped pay her living expenses. Well, if all of a sudden she had to add $30,000 to her income and pay tax on $45,000, that would probably take 50% of her stipend just to pay the taxes, which sort of defeats the purpose of being a graduate student. I think what will happen is a lot of people will decide to forego graduate school, and then that lowers the number of people with graduate degrees that we have in our state who are available for those higher paying jobs, which will then generate more taxes.
A friend of mine described that as eating the seed corn for the future generations. So struggling grad students are going to pay more in taxes, and billionaires are going to pay less in taxes.
And Helen, I want to go back to, I think you were asking about the deductions for small business owners. I think one of the things that a lot of small business owners are concerned about is they're going to be losing that deduction for state and local taxes. And potentially property taxes. Now, right now, it depends on what comes out of this conference committee. They may be letting us deduct property taxes up to $10,000. But the latest I heard was they've cut that down to $7,500. I don't know what will happen there. And in Tennessee, where we have no income tax,
that doesn't affect us much.
Well, it does. It does affect the sales tax because you can now take a deduction for sales taxes in Tennessee, which we're now paying 9.75%, and that's a big deduction for small business owners. If we lose that deduction, that will greatly impact the bottom line on which business owners have to pay taxes.
So another loser, I hear, will be health care. People with high health insurance or high health care bills, people on Medicaid. How is that? What's the deal with that?
Well, so this is
what's the impact on health care going to be?
Yeah, this is almost certainly going to be in the bill. So the proposal is to eliminate the mandate for people to buy health insurance. And the mandate means that if you don't purchase health insurance for yourself, then you are required to pay a fee for not having health insurance. I think this year it's around $600. If they eliminate that mandate, that means a lot of people will not be buying health insurance because there is no penalty to force them to do that or to make them think about doing that. The estimates right now are that will, because that destabilizes the market, more people who are sicker, therefore need to buy health insurance, will raise the premiums for everybody who is buying insurance. And the estimate is that through a combination of people who can afford those increased premiums and those who choose not to purchase health insurance, that 13 million people will now go without health insurance. And as a result of that, premiums are going to rise, estimates are, by 10%. So it's sort of a spiral that is going to increase health care costs,
Yeah. Well, if only we had Medicare for all, we wouldn't even be having to force people to have a mandate and force people.
And it's going to be
I understand that. If I were a young single person in perfect health, I would resent having to be forced to buy. I know that at any minute you can have a car wreck or have anything happen to you and you would need it. I understand that, but I wish we just had Medicare for all and then not worry about not have to stress about it.
Yeah, it's going to be sort of interesting to watch Senator Alexander and his vote, because he came up with a compromise amendment with Senator Patty Murray from Washington, worked across the aisle on this amendment to stabilize the insurance markets, because they were both concerned about this death spiral that we just talked about, and they were promised that their amendment, which would restore those funds to subsidize insurance copays and deductibles for people who can't afford those, would be added to this bill. But so far we haven't seen that. It's sort of been a promise made that may not be a promise kept.
Okay, and I know that another part of this tax bill is eliminating the estate tax. So everybody out there, the myth out there is that, my grandfather worked hard to build up this farm or build up this business and he left it to me, and now the estate taxes are going to wipe me out and we'll have to sell his hard work. And anyone would sympathize with that, right? But who actually pays the estate tax?
Well, right now, if you're an individual, you're
3%, right?
Right. I mean, if you're 3%. An individual, you have to have an estate of $11 million or more.
Well, I thought it was $11 million for a couple and $5-point-something million for an individual.
It's $11 million for a couple and $5.5 million for an individual.
Okay.
So you have to have an estate, if you're an individual, of $5.5 million or more to even begin to pay the estate tax.
So you inherit your first $5.5 million tax-free.
Exactly.
And then if you inherited $5.7 million, you would only pay taxes on that $200,000. Teeny bit.
Yeah, $200,000.
Okay. So very few people are expecting an $11 million or a $5.5 million inheritance from their parents. So the Republicans seem to be masters at convincing people to worry about rich people problems. Not many of us are going to inherit $5.5 million from some, or $11 million from our parents, and so it's just not even something that should be on your radar of having to worry about. And yet they have convinced the entire population that they're all going to be devastated by estate taxes. So anyway, So this new GOP tax bill will get rid of the estate tax.
Well, yeah, and what they're doing again, trying to stay within that $1.5 trillion deficit number, is that they're sort of phasing it in. And what the House bill does is it increases that exempt amount to $10 million. So from $5.5 million to $10 million.
Okay.
And that happens over the next 5 years. But then in 2024, the estate tax is totally repealed.
Okay.
That gets them outside of that window where they're having to account for, how these tax cuts are going to impact the federal budget. The Senate bill actually raises the exemption for an individual to $11 million and makes that permanent. It doesn't totally do away with the estate tax, but again, if you're an individual, you're only going to pay estate tax if you inherit more than $11 million.
So people, unless your mama or daddy has $11 million to leave you, please don't spend a minute of your time worrying about having to pay the estate tax. It's going to benefit people like Eric and Ivanka Trump,
right.
and all the other little trust fund babies. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Does anybody want to call in with questions? What is the number again, Al? 967-2201 if you have any questions for Linda. And Linda, what else do you want to let people know about this GOP tax bill?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me, and I'm sort of on the same page with Senator Corker on this, I think we have heard for years, mostly from Republicans, but again from some Democrats who really are concerned about the direction that our country is going in terms of increasing the deficit. And this has happened across Republican and Democratic administrations. And now we're being asked to support a tax bill that increases the deficit another $1.5 trillion. And I personally think that it will be even more. Because what we're hearing, when people question whether or not those tax cuts are going to be extended for individuals, usually the answer you get back is, oh, well, they'll be extended when the time comes. When 2025 comes, it'll be a new legislature, a new member of Congress, a new senator, and they will see that we have to extend these tax cuts. Well, if they do, that's going to add even more to the federal deficit unless you start cutting programs. And that's my second concern.
They are going to cut anything to help the poor. What's going to happen is the deficit's going to explode, and then they're going to say, all right, y'all, we got to cut everything. And the first place they're going to go for are things that help poor people.
Well, and I'll just tell you,
things like that.
Right, and I'll just tell you why that is, because in my experience as a chief financial officer for an organization, when you have to balance your budget, which is what we should be doing with the federal budget, you have either got to raise more money, so in my case, it meant that we were going to have to raise tuition, or you're going to have to cut expenses. And when you cut expenses, you go to the biggest part of your budget to cut, because that's where you're going to get most of your cuts. Well, for the federal budget, the biggest places where we spend money is on the defense budget and on social programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And so that is where the federal budget is going to be balanced. We don't hear a whole lot of energy around cutting the defense budget, so the next biggest piece is going to be these social service programs.
And I had a friend, who's a big believer in trickle down and all that, and I tried to give him this example. I said, imagine you owned an chain of auto parts stores. What is going to help you as the owner of the auto parts store? If the government cut your taxes and you could keep all this money, would you build more stores or hire more workers if the general population has no money to fix their cars and buy stuff for their cars? No, you're just going to sit on that money that you made from the tax bill. You might invest it in something, I don't know what. Or scenario B, where you're the guy who owns the auto parts store and the minimum wage is raised, all of a sudden all these people who work minimum wage jobs have $100 extra in their pockets, and they're like, oh my God, I'm going to get my tires, I'm going to change my tires, I'm going to fix my brakes, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Or if maybe those people got a tax cut, lower income people get a tax cut, and they all of a sudden have a bunch of extra money in their hand, and they're coming to your store day and night buying stuff to fix their cars, you're going to have to hire more workers to service those people, or maybe build some more stores. So, scenario A, in which all the workers around you, all the people in your town are broke because they're making minimum wage and they're not getting much in tax breaks, is really not going to help you, because without a lot of demand, there's no reason to expand, build more stores, or hire more workers. Whereas in scenario B, you're going to make more if the people all around you have an extra $100 in their pocket at the end of the week. they're gonna fix their cars, they're gonna maybe buy new cars. You know what I mean? So I just think that overall the economy is so much better if we will just raise minimum wage and do things that will help workers, not do things that are going to help, people at the top who are already just doing fine. I mean, they're making so much profits that they're having to put them overseas and like hoard them in Cayman Islands and places like that. Whereas if you put more money in the hands of workers, they're going to spend it right here in Franklin County. If we raise the minimum wage, a McDonald's worker would have like $100 extra dollars in their pocket. Would you rather that $100 extra dollars get spent right here in Franklin County, or would you rather it go to Mr. Head of McDonald's Corporation, wherever he lives? I don't know.
Yeah. I always call the taxpayers, the local people who have more money in their pockets, the real job creators.
Yeah.
Because, like you say, the person who has $100 extra dollars in their pocket is going to go to the small business owner on the square right here in Winchester and spend that money at the auto parts store, at the grocery store, at a restaurant.
Get their hair cut.
And that is raising the income in our local economy, not a CEO for Walmart who lives in Arkansas. It may be helping people over in Arkansas, where Walmart is headquartered, but not here.
So Democrats believe in trickle-up economics. We think that if working people have more money in their pockets, that the demand raises and that helps the economy, whereas Republicans believe in trickle-down economics, where you put more money in the hands of billionaires and CEOs, and then somehow that trickles down. But it never quite does. It never quite does, unfortunately. Well, we haven't had any callers? No? Okay. Well, we got about 5 more minutes. Okay, another question that I had is, I've heard a lot about pass-through income. What is that? What does that term mean?
Well, pass-through is sort of a broad definition, so I hit on it a little bit earlier, talking about small business owners who pass through their income from a Schedule C on their tax return to their individual tax return and then pay tax based on the rates that individuals pay. Pass-through income can also be very high income earners, like Donald Trump's corporation. They have hundreds of pass-through businesses. That's why there has been so much emphasis on lowering that pass-through rate. I was reading something the other day that one of the things that's being negotiated right now by Senator Ron Johnson, who is a small business owner himself, knows a lot about this, was negotiating a deduction to pass-through income of 23%. So the first 23%, say if you are that $50,000 owner, $50,000 business owner that made, you'd get 23% of that taken off, that on which you wouldn't have to pay taxes.
I think we have a call. Is it one? Okay. Did I pick up the phone? Oh, sorry. Hello?
Oh, I think you may.
You hung up on
Cut 'em off.
Emphasize the fact that it will affect me as an individual taxpayer not to be able to count my sales tax, because when I list my deductions, that is a big deduction based on my income, and each individual gets to count that if they do deductions. So it will not only affect small business, it will also affect me.
That's true.
That's exactly right, and that's because small businesses are paying based on the individual tax rate, but you're exactly right. It affects individuals as well.
All right, I think I recognize that voice. Well, we got 2 minutes left, and I just wanted to end. Linda, is there anything else you wanted to say before we?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way individuals are going to be impacted are mostly in the way in doubling that standard deduction and doing away with personal exemptions. And I'll just give you a really quick example. It's going to be really important that you sit down and sort of do the math yourself based on what your own family circumstances are. But if you're a family of four, for instance, and you right now have a $12,700 standard deduction and you have two kids, you're getting personal exemptions now of $16,000. You actually lose the amount of total deduction that you're getting now. You're going to have right now a deduction of $12,700 plus $16,000, which is $28,000 that's going to come off of the income that you have to pay tax on. By doubling the standard deduction and doing away with the personal exemptions, you're only going to have $24,000 that you are deducting from your income. So you're actually going to be deducting your income by $4,000 less, which means you're going to be paying tax on $4,000 more. So it's very specific. A family of four right now is probably going to be a loser or might even break even depending on where the tax rate cuts break as to your income. It's going to depend on your income, how many dependents you're claiming, as to whether you're a winner or a loser with this tax bill. But it's not going to be huge tax breaks for the ordinary middle class family. At best, it's probably going to be break even, or you might even pay a little bit more.
And just the schools are going to be cut, the police force is going to be cut. I mean, I might have another $1,000 in my pocket, but maybe my library's going to get shut down. My kids are going to lose a few teachers at their schools, so class sizes will rise. I mean, you're going to
and you may lose your health insurance on top of that.
I may lose my health insurance. So what am I going to do with that extra $1,000 when all that happens? But anyway, we are out of here. This is Common Sense Matters, Franklin County Democratic Party show, and we invite you to come to our next meeting, which is going to be this Saturday, December 16th at the Franklin County Annex, and we hope you come on out. Thank you so much.